is Ian Honor. I've been in engineering, I guess, for about 8 years, although in the current position only about 2 now. And it's very different than what I've done previously, so that's kind of a fun change.
Perfect. And can you tell me how you first became interested?
In engineering as a whole, or in this particular position?
How about both?
Yeah, so engineering as a whole, I've obviously kind of taken the same path that most people that end up in this career do. They take things apart, they like fixing things, they like working on things, or they enjoy it's a special kind of creative outlet. There's a certain creativity in engineering, but it's founded around science and design and well known. It's a very structured creativity, which for me was most of the fun of it. Creativity is usually looked at as an artist drawing on a paper or something like that, but the creativity involved in problem solving was always the thing that I enjoyed the most. Whether that's problem solving in an organization, whether that's a business structure, whether it's a hardware device, whatever it is, the problem solving creativity is what got me into engineering.
Awesome. And then how did you know you wanted to do it as a career? Just that same passion and drive?
Well, I guess to start, I didn't know what an engineer did, but it sounded nice. What I knew that I wanted to do was play with things and fix broken things and work on stuff. Now, originally that seemed like maybe I should go into the trades, be some kind of a service technician, perhaps. I guess all that kind of evolved, and I ended up falling into engineering. But it wasn't necessarily a very intentional step. It was more of, well, I want to work on stuff, I want to play with things, I want to fix things. What career fits me? And I originally went into school for mechanical engineering, got most of the way through that, realized that every project that I ever worked on had mechanical aspects, but also electrical aspects. And I knew the mechanical pretty well, but I knew nothing about the electrical. And so at some point I went, well, this whole not knowing anything about electricity is holding me back. I'll just switch majors to electrical engineering. So I'm not necessarily recommending getting all the way through school and switching, but it does go to show that just because you sign up for school in one thing doesn't by any stretch mean you have to finish there. And when I went off to college, I still had no idea what I wanted to do. And to be honest, when I graduated college, I still had no idea what I wanted to do. And the cool thing about the technical fields is that it doesn't really matter. Yeah, so I guess to that one, originally started in mechanical engineering, but transitioned over and graduated as an electrical engineer. Proceeded on.
Just at like a normal university?
Yep, it was a 4-year university. I went to Missouri University of Science and Technology. It's a small engineering kind of specific school there in the middle of Missouri.
Isn't there a test you have to take after college to get a license as an engineer, or is that
there is such a thing as a professional engineer PE license, and I would say the majority of engineers actually are not licensed PEs. There are certain fields of engineering where that PE license is much more required than others. You'll see that a lot in civil and architectural, for instance. In our particular little area of engineering, we work a lot with industries like pharmaceutical, where that PE license is more important, but it's certainly the exception, not the rule. And in electrical engineering especially, very much the exception. Very few electrical engineers pursue their PE unless you work in a certain industry where it's required. It's a good question, and people get, you'll hear about a PE and a big scary exam. One thing to make note, there's actually 2 exams. The first is the fundamentals of engineering. That'll happen usually right when you graduate around the time. Then you become, quote, an engineer in training if you're trying to pursue the professional engineering course. And after you amass a certain amount of experience, the experience depends some on your education and some other factors, but you have to work underneath another PE for a period of time, and then you are allowed to sit for the professional engineer exam, and that's the culmination. But that doesn't actually happen right when you graduate. That happens some number of years into your career. You have to be the kind of person that questions everything, and you also have to be a person that doesn't mind failing. I think that's a big one that I see in engineering, and the people that suffer the hardest are those who beat themselves up over failures. The biggest point of engineering is that we learn from that, and if you don't fail the same way twice, then you haven't failed at all. But it doesn't look that way. As you're going through projects and you see everything bite the dust, you have to keep the mindset of this is a step in the process of engineering. We were learning from this, we're gaining information, and we're moving forward to make a better design or product or solution, whatever it is. But you have to be the kind of person that questions everything and is not afraid to just try it. It might work, it might not. And you certainly have to work on risk mitigation. You have to make sure that you can fail gracefully. You have to set yourself up in a position where a failure doesn't burn a building down. A failure might just trip some alarm system, right? But as long as you design it such that you get an alarm before you get a burned down building, failure is good. Failure is how you learn.
Awesome.
So the starting salary is wildly different in engineering. Engineering is a very tough one because you'll see anywhere from, part of it depends on how you get into the field. Some people come into engineering through the trades. In the end, they make some of the best engineers that I've ever worked with, are people that have had experience hands-on in the trades and then move into engineering. In that situation, your starting salary in the trades will be usually much lower than a starting salary, say, out of a four-year university sitting into an engineering spot. But it varies a lot. I've seen, I think engineering is probably somewhere from 50 to 75 starting on average, I'd say is
awesome.
A reasonable start.
And then for potential for growth?
For potential for growth, it's an interesting one too, because it depends on what career path you choose to take. For engineers, people who start in engineering out of school typically pursue one of two paths. They either become an expert in their field as an engineer, or they go into engineering management and the business side of things. I would say for salary growth potential, it is perhaps easier to make a higher salary moving into management, moving to engineering management. It's simply because there are many more engineering managers than there are principal engineers places, or your top level systems engineer at a company. Take this company, for instance, you're going to have a dozen engineering managers, but we have 4 who are truly principals, expert engineers. So the salary cap probably, and if you're trying to stay as a true engineer and be working on projects and whatever, I would say is up to 200 probably at the very end of your career, of course. Into management, well, it opens a door into a whole different set of careers that are almost not engineering, but often people move from engineering into those roles. So it would be worth noting that I've seen CEOs that started as engineers of very large companies. So all of that varies a ton, and I'll answer that kind of 2 ways, both with my current position and also in other engineering that I've worked in. I've worked in engineering positions that were you and maybe somebody else kind of alone in a lab in a corner, never seeing daylight and crunching numbers. You take that and go to the other extreme. There's some engineers who have never seen an office building. They're on site working outside, overseeing installations, construction projects. So the title engineer does not necessarily lock you into a certain work environment. The title engineer places you as a problem solver and a big picture person, but it certainly doesn't dictate your work environment. You can pursue a work environment that matches your lifestyle and your preference and still stay within engineering of any discipline. We try our best to stay at your nice work-life balance of 40 hours or whatever. One thing that you'll find with most people in the engineering world is that they become somewhat attached to their work and often will elect to finish to get something past some goal threshold, and we'll find ourselves working late nights occasionally, but the flexibility in such a career usually allows you to kind of take back what you give. So even though you might work a really hard 60-hour week one week, you take part of the next week off and kind of get it back. And good companies allow that kind of flexibility in your personal time management, and you can kind of give a little and take a little, but we all certainly try to average a standard 40-hour work week, plus or minus. Varies is correct. In fact, that's the part of engineering that I love the most, is that one day to the next is completely different. We have no idea today what tomorrow is going to bring. That being said, in my current position, I'm a senior electrical engineer by job title only, but if you take what I actually do, it's almost more systems engineering, if you had to give it a name. I am overseeing, kind of from cradle to grave, a project that is, on one day I might be talking to a customer about what their actual requirements are for a system and what the installation environment might look like. And then you take that all the way through now working with a team of designers to actually design equipment that will meet that. The engineer will then oversee making sure that the designs meet all the required specifications, both from the customer as well as codes. There might be legal codes that are required to be met, certain specifications set in place by cities, municipalities, the building itself. So you make sure that the design meets all of the criteria. Then another day I might come in and I'm supporting the floor as they actually construct the designs. And now they're actually looking at design papers and trying to build it and going, well, hey, how do we do this? And so the engineer gets drug in again, and now we're overseeing construction. Once it's built, the same electrical engineer is out there doing the testing on it. So now we're playing with it, pushing buttons, seeing what happens. And if we can break it, figuring out why it broke and fixing it before it goes out to the customer. We try and take things through a full testing regimen to make sure that they meet the quality that we are hoping for before we ship it. And then at the very end, sometimes you're going to site. It's doing field service type of jobs. They say a year down the road they have some problem. Sometimes the engineer goes out to site to fix it, or is talking on the phone with people as they're installing it on how should this be installed and incorporated into other systems. So the cool thing about the engineering is that every day is very different, and it's just seeing a project usually from conception all the way through implementation. Benefits are fun, so we'll start there. The benefits are coming to work and doing something that you enjoy. If you enjoy tinkering, if you enjoy working on solving problems, engineering gives you a place, an outlet to do that. An outlet to do that and get paid for it. And for most of us, that if you find a job that fits you well, you're getting paid for your hobby. And that's the goal, right, in any career, is to go find something that you don't mind doing every day. And so the benefits to an engineer is that the things that we would enjoy doing for fun are the things that we find a way to capitalize on doing for work. That's the kind of, beyond that, there's a lot of career flexibility. You get into engineering kind of in any discipline, and you can move into any other discipline. If you start out as a mechanical engineer, but later decide that you like electrical engineering more, there's usually a way to do that kind of transition. A great example is on our team of people who have the job title electrical engineer. We have one that graduated as a physicist, one as a chemical engineer, others, it's just, you can kind of transition around the career. So if you start out in engineering of any sort, you've got a wide variety of places you can go and things you can do. And if you ever get bored of what you're doing or decide, you know, this isn't for me, there's something else. There's always another door open. And I think that's the real benefit of this type of career path. As far as challenges, there's a lot of responsibility that falls on the engineer of a project. You own a design, you own the architecture of this thing, and when you have a project that doesn't work, that all falls on the engineer that designed it. And for absolutely everybody that spends any time in this field, you will have failures. You will have mistakes that you make that result in problems occurring later. And you have to be able to learn from that and grow from that and not get too beat up over it. But the challenges I think that all engineers face at some point is handling when things don't go the way you planned, because much of the time they don't. And for some people it's a bigger challenge than for others. For some people, things going not according to plan doesn't bother them. They move on and try something else. Some people internalize it a lot, and that's a challenge that I think many engineers have to overcome. It certainly can be. Because there are so many disciplines of engineering, even within an electrical engineer, if I had taken a position as a field service engineer where I was on the road 75% of the time and never home, less compatible with family environment. But very rewarding work. And for some people who don't mind not being at home and perhaps don't have a family at home, they love being on the road. They get to travel, they get to see different places, they get to experience all of these different implementations of technology. That's fun for some people, but not as compatible with family life. On the flip side of that, there's engineers that go into the same office every day at 8 a.m. and they leave at 5 p.m. and they go home to their family. And that type of position is absolutely compatible with a family environment. So again, that's one of the beauties of the engineering career path, is that you can kind of tailor it to be whatever you want. And just because you choose one in the beginning doesn't mean you have to keep it that way. You can come out of school and do field service for a while, gain a lot of great experience, and then decide 10 years down the line you want to settle down at home and have a family. And there's an easy career transition to make that happen. I've hit it already, but doing something different every day is what I love most about my job. The easiest way to predict the future is to look at the past and look at the evolution of engineering and how we got to this point, and it gives you a better outlook of what it is going forward. If you look back in time, engineers have always been problem solvers, but the problems that they are solving evolve. I don't anticipate that the exact job an engineer performs will be much different 100 years from now, but they will be working on different problems. And the actual problem-solving process, whether you call it the scientific method or an engineering problem-solving, whatever it is that you call it, your way of going through these projects it hasn't changed in hundreds of years. They were solving problems on how to build the pyramids, and we're solving problems today on how to build skyscrapers. The technology changes, but the job doesn't. I wish somebody would have told me that it doesn't matter if you don't know what you want to do. I also wish somebody had told me that whatever you do now will not lock you out of something later. Go do something that you find fun now, especially if it's in a STEM field, if it's in technology, whether it's engineering or whether you're coming through the trades as an electrician or whatever else. I wish somebody had told me that there's value in all the trades. I wish somebody had said, hey, you hear about doctors and lawyers and engineers and whatever, but you don't hear about the tradesmen that are out there actually building things and doing things. And those people make the best engineers if they decide that that's the avenue they want to go. The people who have gone out and built things for many years and now they turn around and say, well, I want to design things now. Those are the best designers because they know what it actually looks like in the real world. And I wish that somebody had told me in the beginning that those avenues were equally appropriate for getting into this type of field. And I wish people would just tell me to calm down. Don't stress over what it is that you want to do. Don't stress over exactly what major you take or what class do you take next semester. It doesn't matter. Pursue things that you find interesting, continue to learn, and evolve your ability to learn quickly and learn on the fly and adapt to new environments, because that's what we do all day long. And it doesn't really matter what the challenge is or what the class is or what the topic is. If you're learning how to learn, you are growing as an engineer.